The bounty hunters. So yes, the use of white phosphorus is a dangerous weapon, to such a level it's only allowed in extreme circumstances. Dong finishes explains as the tiny Kobe, now sitting on the table, looks over the container in wonder. Wow! So it's that painful? She asks curiously. Yes, weapons that cause unnecessary pain have been long deemed inhumane and as such are banned. If you have to fight and kill someone, then it's to be done quick and clean. Suffering for its own sake is just barbaric. He continues as the little clone puts down the mortar shell and looks over the still growing pile. Why do you have so much? One of the other patrons asks in surprise, and Tang snorts as he finishes assembling his sniper rifle and setting it on the table. It's unloaded but still a large and impressive weapon that looks puny next to the pop gun. Because we're bounty hunters, every time we leave our ship then anything can happen. This gigantic weapon here was custom made to hunt a type of monster called a CarX. Don't you need to bring parts back? If this weapon can get these gigantic chunks of metal up to supersonic speeds, then what could be left? Actually, it takes 2 shots in the same place to kill a CarX. This weapon is actually insufficient for purpose. You're kidding. That sounds more like a Zayden or Yaoya dream hunt than anything real. The librarian notes. It was very real. I even have some of the teeth of one of them in my personal room. I've carved out the insides and they now serve as my shelving, Tang says. What did you do with the parts you carved out? The little Kobe clone asks. Well, I tried to learn how to carve the stuff and shredded most of it before I was able to make any of them. In the end, I was able to make a fairly crude chess set, nothing too fancy, Tang explains. And you'd think a man who carves his own chess set could actually win a game once in a blue moon, but nope, nothing. Dong mocks him as he brings out a long sword with a brutal point. Is that a melee weapon? The Kobe asks, and he nods. It's an estock, a stabbing sword that was used in cavalry charges in the past. Cavalry? A primitive form of combat where you ride trained beasts to increase your speed and the sheer weight you can bring down on your opponents. So the best cavalry weapons are generally stabbing implements, or ranged weapons for harassment tactics. So if you were a melee cavalry fighter, you started with a lance, a long spear balanced for riding. But it was easy to lose and break, so the estock here was your backup weapon. Dong explains, and the tiny clone looks over the weapon with wonder. He holds it out for her to examine, and as she reaches for it, he lets her hold it by the handle and she stumbles with it, but he catches it. It may look thin and small, but it's still carbon steel all the way through, Dong says. By the way, little lady, I can't just keep calling you kid and miss. Do you have a name? Perhaps a designation? We already know you're a clone of Professor Iva Grace, Dong says. Wait, she asks, and Dong nods. Oh yes, we're looking to protect all her clones as you and they are all witnesses to part of what's been going on. You know what happened to her? She just vanished after an alarm went off and I went into the panic room. But when the lockdown ended, there was nothing else, no orders or anything. An assassin got to her. We need to get you and your sister clone someplace safe so we can figure out what's happening. An assassin? What's that? The child asks. Dong and Tang glance at each other. This is going both better and worse than expected. She's not afraid, engaged and open to diplomacy, but lacking important context. A bad woman got to Iva Grace. We're trying to figure out all the whys of things, trying to get answers. What you did for her might help. Oh, okay, she says. Did you say something about other clones? We did. We've got one of them on our ship. Her name is it 2? Is 2 alive? The first prototype failed badly and the second not so badly. I always thought she might have lived. What kind of shape is she in? Is she all right? No, it's not 2, Tang says slowly. One is alive, she asks. Her number is 5. Dong says, and the girl looks at him oddly. Are you 3? I am, but there weren't any more after me. I'm the one she got the process right with. Properly accelerated aging, proper knowledge absorption, my own self-actualization without insanity. Why would she make more? 3 asks. We don't know. 5 thought that 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all failed prototypes, and she was the first one that survived. Her skill set is chemical and metallurgical studies, 3 asks. No, biochemical and surgical with a focus on assisting with clone production. What is going on? The librarian demands. Miss, please, now is not the time to butt in. You're interrogating a child in front of me with a mountain of weapons, each next to you. This is exactly the time a responsible adult needs to butt in. The librarian snaps. Tang mutters something under his breath. What was that? Simsier Jasen Jarl Dolbol su abspnida, Tang says clearly. Can't even look after your own selves. Was that Vorlaki? The librarian asks hesitatingly. Korean. He's upset, so he's keeping his sharp tongue at least partially under control by speaking in another language, Dong says. You all right, buddy? Tang takes a deep breath and lets it out slowly through his nose. Yes, I will be. Good, Dong says, and there's a slap on the table that causes some of the munitions on them to rattle a little. Tang makes a point of preventing a grenade from rolling off. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Dong demands as Tang glares at the woman. You two come into my library with enough weapons for an entire army, which we have permits and licenses for that you have thoroughly ignored, Dong remarks as Tang starts to pack away his equipment. Oh no you don't. I will not allow you to. The librarian begins both a rant and to interfere with Tang only to suddenly flinch as he grabs her wrist faster than she can blink. Madam, we appreciate that you're under a great deal of stress. We can relate to feeling like you're up against a wall and there's no relief in sight, but you need to stop and consider the situation again. In what way does your current course of action end well for you? Dong says in a low tone. The police. They will call them, please. If it will stop you from acting out and have an unbiased third party here, then I welcome them, Dong says, and Tang immediately pulls out his communicator. Hello, local law enforcement? Yes, I am at the Varlance Public Library. There is a situation that has a chance of escalating into violence if allowed to go unchecked. So could you please send an officer to mediate and de-escalate? He says, and Dong just smiles. 4 individuals involved, myself and my co-worker, a young clone by the appellation of 3, and the librarian, a Miss, she does not have a name tag on, but she is a heavily injured Lydris who has been reduced to a single body. Tang listens for a bit before the call is ended and he pockets the communicator and smiles. They're also sending an ambulance. What? But the hospitals are... The librarian moves for the table, but since she only has one body and neither Tang or Dong are actually off guard, she's caught, and a twist of axiom has her outright collapse. Unconscious but unharmed. It takes 10 minutes for the police to arrive. A large Platin woman who clearly has been working her way through her stress by working out. She pauses only for a moment when she sees the unconscious librarian, the little Kobe waving cheerfully from on top a table laden with weapons and 2 strong men chatting to each other, while a small crowd gossips near them around the tables. No one is reaching for the vast array of weapons and no one makes any moves as she checks the librarian. All right, this woman should have been in a hospital about a month ago. What's going on? The officer asks as a Gobi and 2 Cobes use a series of devices that safely and gently levitate up the librarian and float her out the door and into the back of an ambulance. Simply put, we think the stress got to her. My co-worker and I were waiting in this area hoping to find someone we need to take into protective custody. We have. Dong explains before pointing to 3, who gives a cheery wave. However, the librarian was just growing more and more irrational. She detected our expanded axiom storage and demanded we empty them out in order to prove we weren't going to steal from the library, and also refused to acknowledge our registration and licenses to operate on the world. And I wasn't called earlier why. We weren't sure who exactly was coming, and we didn't want to scare them off. Thankfully, 3 here is a brave soul and a curious one as well, so us turning out our pockets only attracted her interest. I see a lot of hardware on those tables. Do you have more? This is most of the weapons, but we each also have armor, survival gear, and personal effects as well. Why do you carry so much kit? Our job is both very boring and very exciting, and we don't get much warning when it switches from one to the other. So we simply stay prepared as best we can at all times. That includes a bug-out system in case we need to escape into the nearby wilderness and go dark for a while. You really have the tools to go camping? The officer asks, and then her eyebrow goes up when Tang withdraws a large tent from the inside of his jacket. I assume that tarp can be set up? It can. I know who you are. Everyone working in every station on the planet knows who you are and what you've been up to, what the scream was, why I can speak freely again, she says, but Dong holds out his communicator anyways. No need to skip procedure. It sets a bad precedent. Here are our licenses and registrations for our ordnance. Dong says with a smile, and the officer takes it before Tang tosses his own to Dong, who presents it as well. She examines them both and nods. They're in order, and Miss Shoreshire here was out of order to ask you both to empty your pockets. The rule against axiom pockets and folded space is so she can examine or scan them, not so she can start messing with people who haven't done anything wrong. What's going to happen? She's literally missing heads. Part of her normal neural system is down. The fact she's been in anything other than a constant panic attack is a miracle, the officer says, and Dong nods as he takes back the communicators and hand Tang his own. So can we put our things back in our pockets now? Tang asks. Yes, please. Legal or not, I don't like seeing that level of ordnance floating around. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll try to scare up wherever the assistant librarian has vanished off to and get things organized. Unless Miss 3 here has any issue being taken into the custody of these 2 gentlemen, the officer asks, giving 3 an even look. I'll go with them. This seems like more fun than measuring chemical compositions in individual sample ingots anyways. 3 confirms. And that makes our day much, much easier. Thank you, little lady, Dong says as he starts systematically putting everything away again. Not only were the axiom pockets he has packed, but there was a certain order to things he did, so he knew where everything was without looking. It was just smart management. It takes the officer 5 minutes to get in contact with an assistant, and it takes the men just as long to tuck everything away. The whole time, 3 is asking questions about every piece from its make and manufacture to where they bought it and why they carried it. Soon enough, they were at their little shuttle listening to the harrowing tale of how 3 had snuck across the campus and then across the street to the public library. She had a good way with stories despite being very young physically and likely younger still chronologically.